Society likes to tell us as men we're broken, we're not good enough, that in order to be good enough, we need to have things like Lambos and lots of money. But Freemasonry doesn't do that. Freemasonry says that you are good enough as a man, you are good enough as a person, you're good enough as a human being. But more importantly, it says that whilst you're good enough in here, we need to bring that out in you. It's not that you need these external things to build you up. It's that we need to bring who you are inside out and show the world who you are.
The first degree, or the ceremony of initiation, is the foundation upon which all Masonic knowledge is built on. Especially when we consider that all of the lessons that we can take from Freemasonry and apply to our own lives in the second, third, and higher degrees mean nothing unless you have that foundation degree. In this episode of Deep Dive, we're going to go through the ceremony of initiation and explore the principal lessons that each of the different parts of that ceremony are trying to teach and what they mean for us as we exit the four walls of the lodge room and go into our daily lives, whether it's at home or at work. In this talk, we're going to go deep into all the lessons of the first degree ceremony. To give you a little bit of backstory, I was invited by one of my local lodges to come and present this talk at their recent meeting. The way I approached this talk was to be general in nature, so it could apply to non-Masons as well as to Masons.
The comments, opinions, and views shared during this program are of those individual Freemasons and do not reflect the official position of a Grand Lodge, concordant body, appendant body, Masonic Authority, or craftsmanonline.com.
Welcome to the Daily Masonic Progress Podcast with your host, Right Worshipful Brother Darren Allett.
One of the key things about Freemasonry is if we are to make good men better, well, the way we do that is by taking what we learn within these four walls and applying it in our life outside of them. Because it's all well and good to come in, sit in lodge and go, okay, I'm now a better man. This phrase is very appropriate to religion, and I think it very much applies for Freemasonry as well. And that phrase is, and this is, again, the context you'll understand, is they say, going to church makes you as much of a insert religion here as standing in a garage makes you a car. And I would argue that coming to lodge makes you as much of a Freemason as standing in a garage makes you a car. Because if you come in, you sit here and you either just spend the whole time on your phone or you just look aimlessly into the wall and you don't pay attention and nothing sinks in, then you've wasted your time. There's a really interesting saying from Confucius is that thought without labor is a mind wasted. So we're going to step through the different parts of the degree, and I've got some stuff that I've prepared, but I'm also going to go on a little bit of a tangent because there's a few little thought-provoking things in here that I just haven't covered in my initial research. So we're going to start with the way every Masonic meeting starts, and the first degree ceremony starts itself. It starts with the opening of the lodge. And you might be thinking, well, why is the opening of the lodge important? Well, it's actually one of the most important things that we do in Freemasonry because of the symbolism and the metaphor behind it. Now, as we just saw the opening of the lodge, it obviously begins with the master and all the officers taking their position. And then it also involves the lodge's security and verifying that everyone here is a Mason. And that's really important to do. And the other aspect is, as we see all the lodges announce their responsibilities, that is to tell us that everyone knows what they're here to do and what they're responsible for. It is very clear as to who is supposed to do what. So I want you to think about the importance of making sure that responsibilities are delegated and everyone is aware of those. But the opening of the lodge culminates with the collective agreement that we are all here with a spiritual foundation. You know, we end the opening ceremony with a reading from the volume of the Sacred Law. And that is very important that we all acknowledge at the opening that there is a higher power that we are all accountable to, especially when we are performing our work. Now, the other thing about the opening of the lodge is it serves to bridge the traditions of Freemasonry. You see, we've got our ancient operative brethren who would have gone to work every day. They would have had their own kind of opening ceremony in a sense. I know you see it on a number of work sites where everyone gets together before they start work. They have a stand-up. Everyone goes and gets their tools and puts them out and lays them out in order. Everything gets set up so you can actually go ahead and work, and it's not left as a mess from the night before. But it also allows us to enter into the view that we're in this room because we're here for moral and personal development and spiritual development. And part of preparing the lodge and going through that opening ceremony is it symbolically prepares this room as a space for everyone to commence their work. And what that does is it mirrors the importance, but it also gives us a sacred space to work in. And that sacred space allows us to not only perform our Masonic activities, but come into personal growth. Now, I think this is a really important point to touch on, is the sacred space that is these four walls. Now, I can go into a number of deep tangents, but I'm glad to see that no one has their phones out. That I see too many people coming to lodge these days and sitting there on their phone and on social media during lodge. So it is a sacred space. But there's something more important about that sacred space, and that is Freemasonry is what I would consider to be kind of a sandbox or a sandpit. Now, I work in software engineering, and we have what's called development environments, or UAT, or computer software has sandboxes. And if you think about it, it's really there to say that this is an area that you can go and play with, and if you break it, that's okay, because it's designed to break. Now, that sacred space is also a place for us to come in from the outside world and know that we are here to meet as Masons. We all believe in the same things. We all agree on the basic foundation and those basic principles. But it's also sacred from a personal development perspective. You see, inside of the four walls of the Masonic Lodge, it doesn't matter if you stuff up. Now, some of the past masters, not you fellas, but some of the past masters that sit up in the back corner, and when someone misses a comma, or they miss a pause, or they get the word wrong, and it's wrong, because this is a safe space where you can actually come and learn and make mistakes and grow, because it's where you actually get to put into practice those theoretical lessons I'm about to go into from the first degree, and try and actually turn them into practical lessons as well. And the importance behind that is so that if you go out into the outside world and you go and try and apply some of these principles, like it could be a public speaking thing, there's less pressure on you in that real world when you're in front of, a room full of your employees or your bosses, if you're having to make one of those presentations, because you've stood up in front of the panel of the past masters and presented a charge before, and you've dealt with probably the harshest audience you possibly could. Now, that's obviously a joke. We know that everyone's here to support each other. But it's that supportive environment that we enter into and we all acknowledge when that lodge is tiled. But it's also symbolical, and it's there to be a metaphor to make us think about how do we prepare our own lodges. Now, Freemasonry has this metaphor of the building of the temple. We use the story of King Solomon's temple and the building of that as the overarching metaphor for everything. Every one of us, we're building our temple. The lodge itself, we're building the temple. We're always forever building the temple. It's this magical building that is never done. Well, at least within the confines of the first 3 degrees, the building is never finished. So that's symbolic that we're always working and always building the temple, whether it's ourselves or so forth. So the opening of the lodge should make us think, well, how are we preparing our own lodges, i.e. ourselves, whether that's our mind, our workspace, our home, our office, our car, whatever it is, to make sure that it's secure and to make sure that it is a sacred space that we can actually go and perform our work. How have we put it into order so it's not within chaos? And when everything then comes into order, that allows us to grow and be productive, which is what we're doing. The whole point of Freemasonry is to go to work. Labor is what we are doing. Now, I know you said we're not going to do any work tonight or any labor. Well, we should be having some mental labor, because as much as it's great to get out and physically build the temple, there's some planning that has to go on, and maybe you need to go and learn your skills so that when you actually go to the job site and you need to use the hammer and the chisel, you are able to actually shape that rough stone into the thing of beauty, as opposed to like have one hit and the whole thing turns to dust. So the symbolism of opening the lodge teaches us the importance of having that deliberate preparation and the value of creating that sacred space. Now, the other thing about it is when we open the lodge, you would have noticed the first thing the master says is to order. He calls everyone to order. Now, why is the word to order probably the first thing that comes out of the master's mouth? And I don't mean the have you all sign the presence book. I mean that's not necessarily part of the ceremony. But there's something very important about that, because what is happening when we all come to order, we are removing chaos. You see, that outside world, outside those doors and outside of these four walls is chaos. And then when we go through the process of opening the lodge, we are removing all of the chaos and we are coming into order. Now, that's the overarching metaphor of actually the first degree is leaving chaos. And there's a number of ways chaos can be represented, but it is coming to order. And order itself brings peace. Order itself is acknowledgement, right? That we're here for that bigger purpose, and it's where we can actually then be productive. Now, it's important that we bring things into order and we remove chaos, because when things are in order, we can actually achieve so much more. So that's one of the most important symbolical lessons of the opening of the lodge. And who would have thought something as simple as everyone standing up and going, this is my job and this is what I do, and a little bit of a reading from the volume of Sacred Law could be such a deep and powerful ceremony and have such importance. So hopefully, as we continue on into the aspects of the first degree, we'll also see some very important lessons. Now, the first thing that happens at the initiation, or as we're going through that first degree ceremony, is we have a candidate for Freemasonry who is seeking admission. And when he is seeking admission into Freemasonry, he is standing at the threshold of the lodge. And he is seeking entry into the mysteries and the privileges of Freemasonry. Now, we have, obviously, the alarm, a number of inquiries that go on. And what that does is that actually represents that candidate's first step from chaos into order. Because part of doing all of those inquiries and the exchange of dialogue between the different officers, that is about ensuring that the person who is about to enter the lodge is someone who can become part of that order. And it's not someone who is going to bring that chaos from the outside world into the sacred space of these four walls. So those inquiries are really important. But it also then starts to demonstrate that they're prepared to make that step from darkness, from chaos, into light and into order. And they're there to seek that Masonic knowledge, which is then underscored by their physical demonstration of humility and readiness. Now, I want you to think about what that demonstration of humility and readiness looks like. You've all been there outside of the lodge on your initiation. But what the ritual of seeking admission encapsulates is the Masonic values of diligence and moral integrity, because we don't let someone into the lodge unless we've had a diligent process of ascertaining whether they have that moral integrity. And that in itself should mirror our journey as human beings, because if we want to go on a quest for the deeper understanding of life's mysteries, because that's kind of what we're here for in terms of Freemasonry. I mean, yes, we have a great time, we make some great and amazing friends, and we have a laugh, and we have a gig, a very big charity gig. We have all of those things, but ultimately we're here to discover those life's deeper mysteries. And what that allows us to then do is become well regarded in that community, because when you come into that lodge, you would then acknowledge the same as everyone else. Now, I've heard many Grand Masters will say the only difference between an apprentice apron and his apron is a number of embellishings from embroidery, but it is very much true. You see, Freemasonry, once you're in those doors, everything else doesn't matter. Who you are outside of that world doesn't matter, because we don't care about the external. We don't think the external qualities that we have are important. We regard the internal qualities that are the most important thing in a person. Because at the end of the day, all of those external things we can actually lose at a moment's notice. And then all you're left with is your internal character. So if there's no internal character, then whether you drive a Lambo and have a big house and have a jet ski, all of that means nothing if you're a horrible person. So we then need to think about, well, in any quest for growth or on any journey that we go into, we do need to enter into new realms of knowledge, and we do need to go into a new environment. So how do we do that in the way? Well, the thing that we need to remember is we need to go into it with humility. I know this is a bit of a Grand Masters theme, but it takes a lot for someone to go and put aside all of their external parts of wealth and station, as we say, and then meet everyone on the level and come in and say, I'm happy to acknowledge that we're all the same. Now, that could be very difficult for men in the city, for example, who might be CEOs of big companies, to then be able to come into a room out here at Blacktown, not to saying that there isn't CEOs of companies out at Blacktown, because there's some very big businesses out here, but out here in the western suburbs, we tend to be a little bit more working class than them folk in the city. So the fact that someone can, again, we use the saying, the monarch exchanging the scepter for the trowel, which shows that there is that element of humility. And the idea of going through that admission process is teaching us the value of preparation as well as having that strong moral foundation. And it reminds us that true enlightenment that Freemasonry is there to provide isn't just going to come from that desire for personal growth, because you can go and get that personal growth watching the YouTube videos, and I mean these ones, for example. You can go and read books and you're going to get personal growth. But it's that underlying commitment to ethical conduct and working for the betterment of those around us, because we're not here as selfish individuals. We have brotherly love. We're here to encourage and support each other and help them grow. And by helping others grow, we ourselves grow. That's the whole idea about this collective work to build the temple. You can't actually have one person go and build the whole thing on their own. You go and read the story, and it's contained in our ritual, where there was thousands of workers who built the temple. Not one man could have done it, not even King Solomon. He had to get King Solomon, the mighty king that he was, had two key generals per se. He had his two principal officers, Hiram of Bith and Hiram king of Tyre. They were the ones who helped him, because Solomon knew he couldn't do it on his own. So as much as he was wise, and perhaps there's some underlying lessons to keep reading about Solomon, but we know that we can't build the temple on our own, so we have to support each other. Now, the next part of the ceremony comes to where the candidate is being admitted. And this is where we then have that physical transformation, because he now crosses that threshold. That door is open because he knocks and he comes in. And he makes a gesture where he commits to Freemasonry, because he is then asked, are you going to commit to Freemasonry? And he says at that door, yes, I am. We also then acknowledge that the great architect is there to assist us in our journey. And we do that because we know that we can't do anything ourselves. We need the powers to be from above to help and guide us through that as well. We then have a presentation to all the lodge members where the candidate is presented to everyone. And that is to show that he is humble and he is one of you. And it's also for you to see that, yes, he is here for genuine reasons and not for those wrong ones. But what this also does is emphasize it emphasizes that moral integrity. That presentation shows that he is someone that has that moral integrity. We then move on to think about that we need to consider how we ourselves assess our readiness to go ahead and do things. If we're going to try and do anything in our lives, are we actually acknowledging the being above that guides us, or are we trying to do it on our own? You see, that's a key part of that admission aspect. When we're asked, in whom do we place our trust? The answer is in God, our supreme being, our great architect. And we should be taking that outside of these four walls to know that in anything that we're trying to do in life, we do need the great architect to assist with us. So that teaches us the importance of approaching life-significant transitions with thoughtfulness, integrity, and a firm commitment to our principles. Now, the next part of the ceremony, I've combined it into what I'm going to call seeking light. And it's encompassing a number of the different elements that go through from when the candidate comes towards seeking light. Now, he does stand, that candidate, at the threshold for enlightenment because he is still in the dark. He is still unaware of what is actually going on inside of our world that is Freemasonry. He is still in a symbolic state of chaos in a sense because this is an unknown world to him. Even though he's in the room, it's still unknown. It is still very much chaotic. It's our mission there to bring him to order, and we do that through the whole advancement towards the east. That's done in a very specific way where he takes these steps towards the east and he's stepping towards the sun and he's stepping towards the light. And then that ends where he takes that promise, that public commitment to Freemasonry. Now, I say public commitment even though we're in a private room, but it's a commitment he makes in front of everyone else. It's not a little private commitment he's made outside. It's one that he said before everyone, but most importantly, he's made that commitment before his own supreme being, his own deity. We then get to where the ritual then talks about the importance of pursuing wisdom, and it talks about that Masonic light. And it says that that Masonic light is not only a guide for how we should live our lives within these four walls, but how we should then take those lives outside. And that mirrors our natural desire to be curious. We've all heard the saying, curiosity kills the cat. If human beings are curious, we should always be seeking for light. And that is really what that whole part of bringing to the east and the promise really tries to emphasize. So how do we, in our daily lives, seek our own enlightenment? What are you doing outside of these walls to get more light? Now, you could argue that people say, like Andrew Huberman, if you watch enough YouTube, the first thing you need to do when you wake up is go and get some vitamin D and get some sun on your face. That's one way to get light, but it's also just how do we consume knowledge and how do we take that from all these different places? Because knowledge is not necessarily one thing. Knowledge is very broad. So we then need to understand that the Masonic significance of seeking light is the value of approaching our quests for personal growth with humility, integrity, and openness to learning. But that true enlightenment comes from the commitment to living ethically. And it's why that commitment is made on the volume of the sacred law, because the volume of the sacred law is that law of morality. It defines for us what is and what is wrong, which is why we have that commitment on that volume of sacred law to reaffirm that we are here to live ethically. Now, after that, the candidate gets to discover light. And that's my way of saying we all know what happens. But it is a solemn atmosphere within the Masonic Lodge when the candidate discovers light, because he has this express desire for that light. And we then transition that candidate from ignorance into the beginning of knowledge and the beginning of wisdom and the beginning of understanding. And it's a very, very significant moment for anyone. And what that means is that it represents that we are now at the very, very start. It's like a sunrise. You see, the more that you sit there and watch a sunrise, you see more and more light come, and it tells you that you need to pursue it. And you can't run away from a sunrise. No matter what we try and do, as the sun is rising, we can't run west and hope to escape it. We simply can't do that. So it is telling us that now we have the light, we need to continue towards it. We then get to the part where the master talks about the three lights and how those three lights further enrich our journeys. And they offer guidance on our duties, our morality, and how we govern ourselves. We get told about our duty to God, our morality, where it comes from in terms of the square, and self-governance being the compasses. That's what those three elements represent. And it is that we get told about those three great lights and how they're important in our lives. But it then gets to the part where we talk about the three lesser lights, and we acknowledge that as great as those three great emblematic lights are, those lesser lights also are important. We have the sun, the moon, and the master. Now, the sun represents, obviously, the natural day. The moon, I find the moon to be a very interesting metaphor, because the moon doesn't actually provide its own light. So if you think about that, what the moon actually does is the moon is reflecting the light from the sun back onto Earth. So even when Earth is at its darkest, and you would argue that during darkness is when it's the most chaos, because of what happens in the dark, bad things tend to happen. So that is why we have the moon, which is a lesser light, but the moon is really just a reflection of the sun. And it reminds us of the power of the sun, but it also gives us that opportunity to still have access to light in chaos. But the other element is the sun, the moon, and the master of the lodge. And what that represents is that despite we've got light, we still need governance, because we can have all of the light in the world, but if we don't have the governance to be able to discern between the light and how to navigate through when there is darkness, such as when it's night and pursued towards the light, we're going to be kind of screwed, because knowledge is nothing without that action. And the whole idea of having that governor who then tells you how to behave and what to do and how to work is to then guide you how to use that light, which is also some significance of the worshipful master. We then head to the secrets and where those secrets are communicated. Now, this is a significant juncture in the ceremony itself. Well, it's this experience that happens inside that sacred space. And only you can say that you've had that experience if you've got them in the legitimate way. I mean, I can go and get a certificate from Harvard University. I can just go online and print one off and say, yeah, I'm a doctor of psychology. Now, I can watch all the YouTube videos and read all the books about psychology. I can go and buy all the university textbooks if I wanted to, and I can go and study them. But without having gone through that physical process and gone through that transformative journey of actually earning that certificate, then all of that is kind of void. So that is why it is really important that we then get those secrets. But that also marks the formality where we are then actually a Mason. You could say that taking the promise makes you a Mason. To an extent, yes, but it is that moment when you are given the secrets by the master that is what makes you a Mason, because now you're part of the club. You're on the inside. Because up until that point, even though you've gotten to that moment, you could still be walked out, theoretically. Not that we would. And you wouldn't be a Mason. Because how do we demonstrate to others that we're a Mason, as we're then told? It is through being able to communicate those secrets. So without those, we're not actually a Mason. So hence why those are very important in this part, because it is that catalyst that there's no turning back. After that, even if you do the worst thing and you get kicked out by the Grand Registrar and you're excommunicated, you're still a Mason. You're just excommunicated. I remember you've said this line yourself, Paul, and your line was, we never unmake them. Once you're made a Mason, that's it. You can't be unmade. And I think that's a really important thing that we need to keep in our mind, is that, this is my little tangent, by the way, that Freemasonry isn't like a gym membership. I joined F45. I did F45 for a couple of years. I lost some weight. I stopped. I put it back on. Now, am I an F45er? No. But if I happen to call off from lodge because I moved somewhere where there wasn't any Masonic lodges, would I stop being a Freemason? No. If you resign from lodge and you're no longer an active member, are you no longer a Mason? No. You'll always be a Mason. And the beautiful thing is you'll always be welcome back because you're always a Mason. But the key thing about the secrets is it teaches us, and through that process of communicating the secrets, it gives us this challenge to live our lives. And again, you're going to hear me say this over and over and over again, this ethical conduct and personal development. But more importantly, it's about that deep respect for the bonds of trust we share with each other. You see, one of the beautiful things about this room is that I trust you. It's scary for me to say to someone like Paul, I trust you. I do, Paul. I absolutely trust you. Because I trust you. I trust you to uphold those secrets. I trust you is one of the most beautiful things that you can say to someone, especially when you hardly know them. And we all trust in each other to not do the wrong thing by each other, because all it takes is one bad apple to ruin them. But I trust each of you to do the thing and to live according to what we say we do in the room. But it also reminds us that true wisdom is not about the accumulation of knowledge, but about applying that knowledge in ways that honour the commitments we previously made, but also contribute to the welfare of the lodge. Now, after we've been given the secrets, we're then examined by the wardens. Now, this is something that I've actually had to really think about in terms of why are we getting examined by the wardens? Like, what's the point of that? Because it kind of, to me, initially seems a little bit superficial. Like, okay, he's got the secrets. Why does he now need to be examined by them, especially when he's going to be given the answers? Like, it seems kind of weird in my mind, but it is an absolutely critical step because it's reinforcing what he just was told. It's having to go through and repeat it, even though he's got it. And we've all been in there. If we've seen candidates pick it up because everyone's picking up information very quickly where they're not necessarily needing the deacon to assist them. They're picking up the answers by the time they get halfway through the junior warden and into the senior warden. Now that shows that the messages is sinking in. And it shows that they're learning. And that's a critical step because repetition and doing something multiple times is key to growth and key to development. It's why you can't just, if you want to take a rough ashlar and make it perfect, you can't just hit it once and hope for a diamond. You need to hit it thousands of times. But that examination is critical because it's about preparing them for the journey ahead. See, if you think about it, he gets examined by the wardens before he gets invested. And the idea is to make sure that he is ready to now go and wear our badge. Yes, you've got our secrets, but are you ready to actually put on that badge and show that you're a Mason? It's kind of like reinforcing that you have made this promise. You were asked, you were prompted to tell people, yes, I've made this promise. Yes, I'm not going to reveal them as part of this examination. So it really brings out the importance of diligence in that process, but also safeguarding the secrets. So we need to then think, well, where does that then help us in our personal lives? So if we think about everything that we do, take any sort of everyday, any day activity, and whether that's here in lodge or outside, and our progression depends on that commitment to upholding what we said that we would do, those promises that we made. If we're prepared to go and break these promises and remove ourselves from integrity, well, you're kind of leaving yourself with nothing because then you don't have those internal qualities. You then reduce yourself to someone who is simply all you've got externally. And we know that, especially in today on social media, all you get on TikTok and Instagram is the highlights reel. You don't actually get the true person. So these then reaffirm our readiness to contribute to the community. It then leads to us being invested and given that badge of a Mason. Now, being invested with the badge of a Mason is that symbol where they're now accepted as a brother. Because if you've ever seen any of these remote tribes and these people from Western civilization go into these remote tribes. Now, a few of the ones that still exist today that are remote and haven't been westernized, you end up dead. So don't go and try and think that you can bring them back into society. They're very much committed to killing anyone that comes near them. But I digress for a second. It happens quite a bit in African cultures. And we do this in Freemasonry as well. When we welcome someone in, I've still got the trowel, by the way, Paul. We give them something to show that they're part of us. It's always that symbolical gesture. As Australians, when we travel overseas, we always take koalas and kangaroos and give them to people. And that's that gesture to say that we formally accept you. We are welcoming you. So the whole point of that investor is to welcome you into the fraternity and say, yep, you are absolutely now one of us, because you were given the secrets, you passed the 2 tests. So he's been given the secrets, he's passed those 2 tests. We are now ready to welcome him and say that he's one of us by giving him the apron. And we're told that that apron symbolizes purity, innocence, and of course, integrity. But the worshipful master then gives him guidance on how to deal with disputes. Now, this is a really good one for all of the husbands, or if you have a girlfriend or a partner of some kind. Now, we're told that if we have a disagreement with the brother, to invite them to retire and deal with it amicably. That's kind of like saying don't go to bed angry at your loved ones. It's saying that if disagreements do happen. It's not saying that they don't happen in Freemasonry and everything's all rosy, although we like to pretend it is. It is actually telling us to address these disagreements. It's not saying that we need to pretend that they don't exist. And the fact that perhaps to some extent that we still do, we kind of just get on with it and we ignore those things. The real lesson there is it's saying don't ignore them. Go and address them, sort them out, so you can actually come back and work with love and harmony. But it also signifies that there is practicality in maintaining that harmony. Because when we're all participating in harmony, work just goes on really easily. Like, how many times have we been at work and it's been a toxic environment and you're just like, the day is going on forever. I can't wait to get out of there. But when you're in a great working environment and everyone gets along, time flies when you're having fun, and you actually want to work a little bit longer rather than get out of there at 5 o'clock on the dot or go to the bathroom for the last 20 minutes and sort of do your daily Masonic progress whilst you're waiting for the clock to hit 5 o'clock. But it is really about reminding us to embody those virtues. But it gives us the fact that all of our Masonic environments are characterized by mutual respect, understanding, and brotherly love, and that they're 3 things that we cannot live without in Freemasonry. We then get down to the next part, the Northeast Charge. And it's my second favorite charge in the whole of Freemasonry, because it's the second one I actually learned. I learned the first working tools first. But it is a critical juncture for our brother. And this is where he is not just taught about charity. We all get that. That's the very easy one. Oh, yep, charity. But this is where he's actually taught that what we're here to do is build the temple. On a foundation laid this evening, may you raise a superstructure perfect in all its parts and honourable to the builder. This is where he's instructed in that metaphor that we are all here to build that temple. Something I spoke about earlier. So again, that's coming back. And that the foundations of his initiation is that moral edifice which he can construct that virtuous life. And then we have that emphasis on charity. But there are some things important about emphasizing charity. There's the lesson that again tells you that, as I said before, and I've spoken about it earlier, where we're talking about humility, and it doesn't matter who you are outside, who you are in here and who you are internally is far more important. That's one of the key lessons of that Northeast Charge, and I think we do tend to miss it. But it then tells us that charity is not merely just the opening of a checkbook. That's easy charity. It's very easy to go and write a check and say, oh, I've got some disposable. Okay, yes, in 2024, economic times are pretty horrible. It is a lot harder to write a check for charity than what it was several years ago. But writing a monetary check is easy charity because we've given up something that can be replaced. Money can be replaced. I mean, next Thursday's payday. The money that I had last Thursday is going to be replaced with new money. It's a cycle. Happy days. But the thing that cannot be replaced is time. And the real emphasis of that Northeast charge is to reinforce to you that time is the most precious commodity, and that giving that to someone else in aid of charity is the most expensive donation you can make, but it's also the most meaningful. How many videos online do you see if this person got $10,000 or here's a Tesla, or you hear about even on a current affair, oh, this person was really helped out with all of this money and it changed their life. Well, in most instances, it doesn't. Give them 6 to 12 months and they're back to where they were before. But we hear time and time again about people squandering their winnings because money, whilst it can be significant, isn't as valuable as that physical time. The other aspect is if you go and give charity from a physical aspect of turning up and helping someone, you've got that demonstration of love, because charity is like when you go and read the volume of the Sacred Law and what that says about charity, it talks about charity as a commitment from the heart and charity as an emotion and an act of love rather than an act of materialism, writing, oh, look at me, I don't like, and I know we as Freemasons like to write the big checks because we like to show the world that we care, but a lot of the charity that we do is not just writing the check, it has that physical lead up to it. It has all of that physical effort in the lead up to it. So it is combining that time effort as well as the monetary side. So you end up combining the best of both worlds. But we need to keep in mind that it does remind us of that foundation of moral integrity and the active practice of charity, and that they're essential to what we do as human beings. Because charity doesn't have to just be those, oh, this person has an issue, we're going to go and help them. Charity can be something as simple as, and again, I don't want you to think of this as not really charity, but it is to an extent. Helping an old person cross the road, or helping someone who is struggling to do something, do it. Picking someone up when they fall over. That's actually more kindly aid rather than charity, but it's the same principle. We need to do those acts, and that's what Freemasonry charges us to do. We then, after the Northeast charge, we are then given the mode of preparation. Now, this is where the symbolism is deeply explained, and it's designed to underscore a key transition that happens, that we go from the chaotic world, the profane as it says, into that sacred world and into that order. And it highlights our readiness as human beings to then embrace that transition. And we're told that that preparation is of two kinds, internal and external. You see that internal preparation in the heart, again, touching on charity. But the importance there is about that if you want to do anything in life, you really just can't go through the motions and do it. You can't just turn up and go through the motions and think it's all going to be good. It tells you that you need to put your heart into it, you need to put your soul into it, that you need to commit to it as a person rather than just have this superficial commitment. And the idea of that external preparation where you're getting ready to come in, that gives you all of the symbolism to remind you of those very important lessons. And I'll let you think through what they are. But effectively, they all come back to things like sincerity, humility, and the journey of pursuing intellectual enlightenment. But if we then take that lesson, if we then take that lesson of preparation and we then say, okay, well, how do we then take preparation and go outside of the walls and apply that? Now, for example, preparation for tonight's talk. I went and did all my preparation, but it could be preparing for anything. It tells us that internal and external preparation. So if you're going to do something at work, well, if you're going to go and knock down a building or do some deconstruction, you probably need to have all the tools and equipment to do it. They probably need to be in a state where they're actually going to be able to do the job and not in disrepair. So that might mean having your equipment serviced. It might mean having petrol and not driving from Cowra to Condobolin with not enough petrol to get back home. A couple of weeks ago for the Raising Under the Stars, I made that mistake. I wasn't properly prepared. I drove 4 hours from Sydney to Cowra, and I went to Condobolin on the Friday night to be with the Grand Master and support a 5th generation Mason, 4th generation Lewis, be initiated. Now, Condobolin is 2 hours further west of Cowra, and I miscalculated. I wasn't prepared the amount of fuel that I would need to get out and back. And I ended up, because it went quite late, I ended up getting to Forbes at 12:05 a.m. I missed out by 5 minutes. The petrol stations had closed and the fuel light was on. Yeah. So I wasn't prepared for that. I wasn't prepared in the heart because here's the thing. I got in the car when I left Cowra and I saw the petrol and the petrol tank was on a quarter. I'm like, oh yeah, I should have enough to make it. My heart wasn't in it. I was going through the motions. Yep, get in the car. Oh, I should be going through the motions. What ended up happening? Not internally prepared. External preparation was very clear, not enough petrol. So guess what I had to do? Here's the fun part. When the fuel light came on, I found there was a 24-hour service station in Forbes. Guess what? It's one of those ones that you pull up to if you're in a big semi-trailer, tap your card and you can fill up your truck with diesel. Now, I drive a petrol car, so that's not going to help. Yeah. I then jumped on Google, and this is where it gets prepared because you can all have a laugh at me for this. I jumped on Google and I was looking for 24-hour petrol stations. Now, as a city boy and being in the country, I thought I'll absolutely find a 24-hour petrol station because all petrol stations are 24 hours. Sadly, they weren't. But Google said there was one in a town called Grenfell. Now, Grenfell is 60 kilometres from Forbes. Cowra is 90 kilometres. Now, when the petrol light in your car comes on, you have anywhere between 50 to 100 kilometres of petrol, depending on what car you have. But I don't know whether I'm going to make it from Forbes to Cowra on the 90 kilometres. And I really didn't want to try and break down on the side of the road with no petrol. That would have been quite awkward. And Grenfell was still, it was a bit of a detour. I was still going to need an hour to get back to Cowra after I got there. But Google said there was a 24-hour petrol station and 60 Ks away. So I'm like, okay, we can do this. I tucked the mirrors in. I turned the aircon off. I had the windows up. I had the lights dimmed, so not to use too much electricity, because cars, the more electricity you use, the more fuel they burn from an alternator perspective. Turned the radio down, and I got to Grenfell. And the 24-hour petrol station was closed. They closed at 11 p.m. And this is at 1:30 in the morning. So guess where I slept? In the car, in Grenfell, in the back of the service station, because I had the money and the metallic substances. I didn't have the internal preparation or the external preparation, so I paid for it. And then I woke up at 6 when the petrol station opened. It was the worst night's sleep I'd ever had. I mean, I don't know if you've ever slept in a car before, but not nice. It's worse than economy in the airplane. And yeah, so filled up and drove back to Cowra, tired and sleep deprived. So internal preparation, external preparation. Now, after the Northeast Charge, we get to our working tools. Now, I love the working tools because they are the most, the one thing about the working tools is that this is where the practical application of masonry starts to come in. Because everything up until now has been symbolic, has been metaphors, this is still metaphors, but it's all been a little bit airy-fairy. Yeah, you're on a good foundation. You need to be who you are inside. It needs to be ready. Like, it's all theory up until you get to the working tools, which is then where the rubber hits the road and the fuel gets in the tank and you go. And it's where we get that practical lesson. Now, those tools, we've got the 24-inch gauge, the common gavel, and the chisel, and we get told about their operative meaning. We then get told that we don't need to use them physically anymore. We need to use them mentally. That's that we're not operative, rather free and accepted. That's where we're saying we now need to use those tools on our mind rather than on that physical stone. And we get told that it's important about how we use and manage our time in the 24-inch gauge. We get told in the importance of doing labor, which is the removal of our personal vices. But also from that labor, that is really about discipline. I'm going to go on a slight little tangent here because I think this is something really important that people often miss. Now, one of the ways that Freemasonry actually makes good men better is because it is difficult. Now, every one of you, it's Friday night. You could have been at home. You could have been at the pub. You could have been anywhere else. And I'm not going to say it was easy for you. Maybe it was easy. But if you've been in Sydney traffic at 5 o'clock or even 6 o'clock on a Friday night, it's difficult. And in society today, if you go and look at the census data, it's more and more apparent that in households, there are 2 full-time working adults. And they have kids and families. Now, that's very different to 60 years ago where there was primarily just one working adult. And if the second adult typically worked, it was generally school hours or they were a homemaker. But now we're in family situations where both people work and there's kids. And it's difficult to get out on a Friday night or whatever night you have your lodge meeting and come to lodge. We're all dressed up in suits and ties. Now, I used to wear a suit and tie for work and I haven't worn one in more than 5 years. I was in the office yesterday and I kid you, most of the guys in the office were either wearing t-shirts and chinos or shorts and t-shirts. Now, this is like a real estate office as well. So the fact that I'm going to work in jeans and a t-shirt, and today I worked from home and I basically was wearing like my sports gear, I don't wear suits anymore. So I had to iron my shirt tonight because it was in the wash from Wednesday night. So there was effort. I had to go and put on my suit and polish my shoes and wear something that I'm no longer comfortable wearing because I don't wear it every day. That requires effort. But it also requires discipline to go, I'm not going to stay at home and watch Netflix. I'm going to get in the car and I'm going to come to lodge. You might be thinking, why is that discipline? Well, think about it. Staying at home watching Netflix gives you that immediate satisfaction. Where's the immediate satisfaction of coming here and listening to me yak on for almost an hour now? What we've got tonight is not going to give us that immediate gratification. It's not like a notification. It's not like we're doom scrolling on TikTok going through all of these different lessons. This is a slow burner. The fact that our meetings each lodge has a meeting once a month, that's a slow burner. It requires a lot of discipline to come to lodge on that 1 month basis. Because fun fact, if you miss one lodge meeting, guess what? Guess how long it's been if you actually go to the next one? It's actually been 2 months since you've been to lodge. If you miss 2 meetings, it's 4 months. And to tell you what, when it comes to talking about habits and building habits, if you read anything online about them, the more you do something, the easier the habit is. That's why they say, if you want to get fit and get healthy, go to the gym every day. Now, they tell you that it's not about going to the gym and trying to do a 2-hour workout. They say don't even aim for that. Simply aim to get out of bed at 5 o'clock when the alarm goes off, have the discipline to do that and push through that pain threshold, and get inside the gym. If you can get through those days where you don't want to do it, it's raining, you're sick, You went to bed at 2 a.m. because you're up late at night doing work, but you still get up at 5, you still get out the door, you still go to the gym. Even if you spend 10 minutes on the treadmill, go, nah, I'm done, go get a coffee, go home and go back to bed. The fact that you went through that exercise, you had the discipline to do that. So, because we only have that one monthly meeting, it requires a ton of discipline to overcome all of the friction and avoid the easy temptation of Netflix to come to lodge. But what that is training you to do is to become someone who can do things that have a far distant payoff that are beneficially good for you. And that's really what the 24-inch, the common gavel is trying to reinforce, amongst a number of other things. I know that's quite a big tangent, but it's like one of my most beautiful tangents that I love talking about, as you can tell. So like when everyone says we need to make Freemasonry easier, we don't. One of the beautiful things is the fact that learning the ritual is difficult. Why that's difficult? Because you need to then do that every day in order to master it. If it was too easy, why would you be then a master of it? If you could just read it and not have had to have learnt it, then where is the effort? Where is the value in actually mastering something? Because you wouldn't be. But finally, we're then taught in the value of education. Again, another thing I'm very passionate about, as you can tell from this talk. But it tells us that we need to plan, have time management, we need to have discipline, and we need to have education in order to be able to then take on anything that is meaningful ahead of us. Because it's really interesting that they're the first 3 working tools. Because without being able to allocate our time correctly, without having the discipline to get through all of these activities, without having the education, everything else just won't fall into place. Everything else won't happen. So it's also important as to why they're the first 3 working tools. The next major thing that happens is the final charge. And that's kind of the culmination of the initiation ceremony to an extent. But the final charge is a powerful summary and basically reinforces everything that has happened to you throughout that night. And it's there to reinforce that the whole idea of what we're doing is to bridge the gap between our ancient traditions of our operative forefathers who built King Solomon's temple and what we are doing today in building our metaphorical temple. And it really re-emphasizes the virtues, the moral integrity, and the fact that we're here to better society. And that by adhering to our duties in terms of our faith and what we do to society and as well as to ourselves, because the final charge, as much as it is about go out and actually do good things in the community and improve the world, you can't do any of that if you're not improving yourself. If you feel that you're broken inside, it is telling you to repair yourself. But the fundamental thing is Freemasonry tells you, and especially through this charge, it reinforces that. And this is, again, I'm going to touch on some things that are happening in society. You see, society likes to tell us as men we're broken, we're not good enough, that in order to be good enough in society today, we need to have things like Lambos and lots of money. But Freemasonry doesn't do that. Freemasonry says that you are good enough as a man, you are good enough as a person, you're good enough as a human being because you're here. You don't need those external validation to tell you you're good enough. You don't, because internally you are. It tells you that, again, reinforcing you're good enough in here. But more importantly, it says that whilst you're good enough in here, we need to bring that out in you. It's not that you need these external things to build you up. It's that we need to bring who you are inside out and show the world who you are. That is why a big portion of not only the working tools, but the final charge is all about reinforcing, about removing those external things, those superfluous knobs and excrescences, and all of those other themes that the final charge covers. It's how we bring out the best version of you is by putting aside those things which we don't need. But the key thing is the final charge is also reinforcing that we need to strengthen our moral compass in order to be able to have the best version of ourselves brought out. That we need to be benevolent. We need to, again, demonstrate charity. We need to live with integrity. So you then end up having the final charge sum up that the invaluable guidance that Freemasonry brings anyone for seeking a life that is meaningful, with that commitment to virtue and that relentless pursuit of knowledge.
This has been the Daily Masonic Progress Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure you follow us on Spotify or subscribe on Apple Podcasts. The Daily Masonic Progress Podcast is available on all streaming platforms with new episodes every week.